After putting up with my dad's friend's disrespect for 8 long years, I finally let him have it. My dad met Harold through some mutual friends years ago, and they clicked right away. I was 18 and in college when I first met Harold, and we never really formed any close connection, but he seemed to think of himself as part of the family and consistently treated me in a condescending and infantilizing way. Every time I saw him, I would try convincing myself it wasn't as bad as I thought, only for Harold to prove me wrong within a minute. He'd push my boundaries, make remarks like, "You're not 19, you're just a baby," while I was talking to other people, and belittle my education or hobbies whenever he could. He always noticed my irritation and would playfully ask if I hated him. For my dad's sake, I always said no. The breaking point came when Harold interrupted a barbecue to say, "I really like you even though you're an impolite brat." I was 20, sitting quietly, working on a paper and replying politely to anyone who spoke to me. Regardless, he had no right to speak to me that way. After that incident, I started avoiding any events where I knew Harold would be present. Yesterday was my dad's girlfriend's birthday, and they hosted a small lunch party at my dad's apartment. I went with my fiance and our 6-month-old son. Harold was there, and even though I hadn't seen him in months, he still talked to me like I was a clueless child. It didn't seem to matter that I'm now 26, engaged, and a mother. I spent the entire party ignoring his unsolicited advice about how I'm too young to get married or be a mother. Luckily, most of the other guests didn't agree with him. My baby slept for most of the afternoon, and I placed him in the bassinet in my old room. When he woke up hungry, I excused myself to breastfeed him. When I returned, Harold was making jokes about how my son was probably exhausting me. He also interrupted a conversation I was having with one of my dad's friends to criticize nearly everything about my parenting, even though Harold doesn't even have custody of his own daughter. But the final straw was when he asked if I had ever considered putting my baby up for adoption. I grabbed my son, told my fiancé we were leaving, and said goodbye to everyone except Harold. As we reached the door, Harold came over, asking why we were leaving. I tried to brush it off, but he kept insisting we stay. After a bit of back and forth, he jokingly asked if I hated him. And this time, I said yes, I do. Can we go now? He was silent, and we left. On the way home, my fiancé said he was proud of me. My dad called the next morning, though, to tell me the opposite. We had a small argument, but ultimately decided to drop the subject. I'm sure this isn't over, but if it continues, it won't be because of me. While it wasn't my proudest moment, and part of me regrets it, I'm done with Harold. Edit. Wow, that's a lot of comments. Let me address some common questions. No, I don't think Harold is in love with me. He didn't tell me to give up my son. He asked if I had thought of doing so when I got pregnant. Still, it was an awful question, especially since he interrupted a conversation I was having with someone else to ask it. As for why I left the party, the adoption comment was the final straw, but it wasn't the only reason. Harold's been making condescending remarks toward me for years, and I've been avoiding him since I was 20. This just marked the end of my patience. My dad can keep being friends with him, but I don't have to like Harold, and I've distanced myself from him for years. Update. I wasn't planning on updating, but I have some free time now. After I left that party, my dad confronted Harold about the adoption comment. Harold twisted it into him being genuinely concerned about me being a young mom, and he apologized to my dad, but I'm not buying it. My dad thinks I should forgive Harold, but I made it clear that I'm done with him. My father called me dramatic when I told him I wouldn't attend any events where Harold is present, but I reminded him that I've been avoiding Harold for years and no one even noticed. I've only seen Harold a few times since the barbecue incident, and I'm fine with that. My father eventually agreed to my terms. He can keep inviting Harold to things, but if I find out Harold's coming, I won't show up. Our relationship is rocky, but I'm no longer letting Harold affect my life. My main priorities are my son, my fiance, and my job, and that's not going to change anytime soon.